When many of us think of runes, we might imagine Viking letters carved into stone or tools used for divination. I know I did. And welcome back to the Conscious Diva podcast. I'm Tatyanna. Today, we're stepping into an ancient landscape of symbols, myth, and mystery as we explore Futhark Rune Mysteries by Judith Dillon. In this episode, Judith invites us to consider the possibility that the Norse runes, known as the Futhark, may have much older roots than many people assume, tracing symbolic connections to ancient cultures, including Phoenician alphabets and even Egyptian hieroglyphs. Rather than presenting runes simply as tools for divination, Judith explores them as a part of ancient mystery traditions. In many ways, the runes begin to resemble not just symbols to interpret, but mirrors reflecting the many cycles we experience through life. I'm so glad you're listening. I'd love for you to follow my podcast, leave a review, and share this episode. You can also watch the full conversation over on YouTube or follow me on Instagram at The Conscious Diva. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Judith. So nice to meet you and have you here.
I've gotten better at podcasts. Originally, I panicked, but now, when you have a good host, it's like really fun, kind of fun meeting new people and talking to them.
Yeah, no, well, we're going to have fun. I listened to the End of the Road podcast and I also listened to Spirit Box. And so
Okay.
I just want to begin with because I think there's your book, which we're talking about here, Futhark, The Rune Mysteries, Origins of Magic and Divination in the Primal Alphabet. And it's quite a deep book, right? There's so much here. It's not like in an hour we can kind of cover everything because there's just so much. So I listened to those two, and I encourage listeners to also listen to them because I don't want to repeat what you've already spoken about in those other two podcasts. So I thought we could talk about other things that relate to your book. Beginning with maybe people aren't familiar with the word Futhark, and perhaps just begin with what that means.
Well, my original research, which morphed into the book on runes, was on the alphabet that came out of Egypt. It was a West Semitic alphabet that eventually became the Hebrew alphabet. And I started looking at what each symbol represented and realized that each symbol was like a chapter. There was a story attached to each symbol. And when it had to do with the Egyptian technique of coming back, of being reincarnated, being reborn again.
Mm.
And when it went to Greece, the Greeks made it, instead of an alphabet in the original script, that they became alphabeta, which is our alphabet. But they also became initiated into the Egyptian mysteries and changed the Semitic language, the Canaanite script, into Phoenician, because the phoenix is reborn every 1,000 years. He has a fiery death and is reborn. And so eventually this pattern, a lot of different people took the pattern and used their own languages, their own symbols. Some of them, like the tarot cards, used pictures. Some of them, like an Irish script called ohms, used just little stick figures, but each had a name and a story attached to the name, and it fit the original pattern. And Futhark is just like the alphabet is named after alphabeta. The Futhark are the first 6 letters of the Germanic runes, the northern runes. And rune itself actually means a secret, a magic secret. And so each of the 6 letters are the Futhark.
Mm.
And the 6 letters are actually a hex, which is a magic spell.
Okay. Okay, so those 6 letters are a hex. Okay. So if someone just puts them together, arranges them to spell Futhark, is that an activation in itself, this word?
If you really know more about what each rune represents, it would make you you'd be able to cast it more
adeptly, I suppose.
More adeptly. That's the word. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's like the more you know about tarot cards, you can do a better reading because you know what the symbols are.
Sure.
And the same with runes, or the same with any of these scripts.
Yeah.
And what I discovered is that the runes were somewhat easier because they they developed before Christianity came and wiped out a lot of the old traditions, which happened among the Celts. And certainly in the Middle Ages, the initiation were secret, because of all the worry about witchcraft. And so a lot of the stories were hidden and had to be hidden because you could be burned at the stake if you told them openly.
Yeah, I mean, you have this one story of, or a retelling, I should say, of how the runes, somebody had been chained up and and had escaped, and they had wondered, did he have the runes
Right,
to dissolve the energy, the metal,
right.
which I thought was pretty cool. Obviously, we're not doing that in today's time.
Well, that was in the Honorable Beats book, where, where so people knew about runes. But as I say, the stories, the sagas, uh, and all these stories were written down pretty much unchanged. And I think I mentioned in the book that it became an old wives' tale that people would be born again. But in some of the sagas, the lovers are reborn into a new form and
Yeah.
meet again.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, and then it became an old wives' tale, as the runes became more modern.
There were quite a few things that I found interesting. So, firstly, just for my own self, throughout my life, like so, runes are not the divination tool that I've been drawn to in my life, but I've been aware of them. I have friends that use them, and just as a lay person, who just knew about runes just from seeing them in a metaphysical store or something like that, I just assumed that they were associated with Vikings and Norse mythology. So I found it so interesting in your book that you were able to trace back the history of how they related to hieroglyphs and other earlier forms of maybe even cuneiform tablets and things like this, because that's what they remind me mostly of, not so much hieroglyphs, but the cuneiform, the when you see them on a clay tablet, sort of etched into clay. And don't think you don't mention that, but do you know what I mean? Like that's what they remind me most of.
The thing I get irritated with is the runes have been co-opted by neo-Nazis. And the Nazis,
Mm.
actually the Nazis themselves, like Hitler, used runes. But
Really?
it wasn't a Germanic tradition. It
Hmm.
came out of Black Egypt, the
Hmm.
blackest Black Egypt, um, through a Semitic tradition, which then traveled to the rest of the world. And even the stories, the sagas claim that Odin picked it up in Turkey, which was a cross-cultural. They had Scythians there, they had Greeks there, they had Egyptian colonies there. I mean, it was a Bronze Age melting pot, and
Yes.
that's according to the sagas. That's where Odin picked up the runes, and then he was told that he would be more famous if he went north. So, which actually did actually happen. The Goths moved north
Mhm.
to Sweden and Norway, and eventually settled.
So if you are a practitioner of runes yourself, what was the interest here? Like what made I realize you have a background in mystery traditions and alphabets and things like that, but like this is the full etymology of runes as a primal alphabet. So how did you get into this?
My family's Norwegian, so I've always read stories and sagas and stuff. And then once I learned about the alphabet and the pattern that it had, each each symbol is, as I say, like a chapter, an unfolding chapter. And then I, because I've had such a diverse background, I realized runes were doing exactly the same thing. They were just using their own traditions. But the runes were actually easier once I started working with the stories because they were written before Christianity. So you actually have the stories. You've got these witch wives giving a pattern, discussing to his child what he should, the various paths. I sing you one, I sing you two. Or there's a Valkyrie, sometimes called Brunhilde, sometimes called Sigrid. Anyway, I she's talking to her lover and saying, again, a series of patterns which fit the runes, like the ninth position. In tarot cards, it's the hermit that's going into the dark, our ninth month. is where the sun actually has lost this battle with the light. It's the autumn equinox. My voice is giving out. But anyway, Sigdrifa tells her lover that 9 is for burial, and she has this whole thing that if you find a dead body, you have to take care of it, because Mother Goose says 9 is for burial. So the Mother Goose rhymes also follow a lot of the same traditions.
Where has Mother Goose come from, in case people may not be familiar? Who was Mother
I
Goose? Who
grew up
was
with
the
Mother
author?
Goose. Mother Goose. Yeah,
Who
I don't
laid the
know.
golden egg?
I just grew up with Mother Goose rhymes.
Oh my
I'm
God, with
old
my
enough now.
I remember some other Goose rhymes too, but it's almost like this mystery author.
Well, it follows the same pattern. And once I realized she's following the same pattern. So
Mm.
that's why one for sorrow. And I mentioned it earlier in the other podcast, the first rune is a fae. One of the first Hall of the Gods actually has all these warriors that are going to come out to fight at Ragnarok, which will be the end of time, end of the Northern World's time. And 432,000 is a number that fits. It's the end of the Kali Yuga. It's, when you enter the world of time, you're entering the world of death. Your time will eventually be up. And so the second rune is, you've got the undivided one splitting apart. Okay. And for whatever reason, most people attach the Virgin Springs arrive in February, and I have no idea why February. Obviously, it's a much warmer place
The
than
dead of
New
winter, I
England.
know, in February.
Right. But
Mhm.
Artemis and Apollo, all the virgins, the twins of the Virgin Springs, all arrive in February for whatever reason, including Scotty of the Bride of Scandinavia.
Mm.
And so all of the stories that have to do with the Virgin Springs, including the purification, because when they separate into the two twin virgins, their red and white waters are flowing, and it has to be purified, which is one of the translations of February, is the month of purification. And so then you go 3 for a wedding, and the virgins have been purified, gotten ready for plowing and planting and all of its. And so the third rune is actually a prick. It's called thorn, among other. It's got several names. And so each position follows, as I say, an older pattern.
Yeah.
But the runes, because they have stories attached to each, which were not lost, they show up in the sagas. And I think it's the third symbol, a mother giving advice to her son. She's a witch wife who is called from the grave. And she
Mm.
said, if the waters are threatening you, the third rune is the drying of the waters, which happens with pregnancy. The previous podcast, he didn't get it because he was a man. And I said, well, what comes after when you, when you, when you get pregnant? Your waters dry up. And he said, really?
No, I
So,
understood that connection and that little connection when
right,
you also
women,
described the
women it
delta,
gets you
the
much
Nile, the
faster.
water coming through, and also the similar in the Himalayas. You have the rivers that are flowing that connect down and bring in life down to the Ganga. There's a
Right,
lot of crossover in mythology there.
right.
You know.
So she sends the waters back to hell. Tells her son that I forget the exact, but anyway, the third and hell rune. Hell is the goddess of the underworld, the 9 for a burial, and that's where in Norse mythology there's 3 wells. One where Odin lost his eye and learned learned a lot of information. And then the bubbling well in hell is where all the waters of the world come from. And so when the waters are sent back there, that's where they originate from.
I found the seventh rune, that the story, the description in there interesting, especially when you talk about number magic here, because my birthday is in the seventh month, and I'm
Okay.
turning 52 this year in the
Okay.
seventh month. And so I found that this very interesting for me. I was like, wow, okay, there's quite a bit of symbolism in that, and considering that this is in the book, the gift as
Right.
rune 7. So is there, and you describe number magic here. So just talk a little bit about that. What is number magic?
There is a lot of number magic in the runes, like all the it's called the triangular numbers.
Mhm.
And all the triangular numbers are pricks, basically. They're actually shaped like triangles. You got 1, 2, and a little dot on top is the first triangular number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is another triangular number. And each one of them has to do with fertility. The numbers
We're
continue
talking
on.
about this, right?
Right, those are all triangular numbers. And 10 is a triangular number. When you get to 10, you start over again. 10 plus 1, 10 plus 2, 10 plus, And so again, it doesn't look very, it's not usually seen as a fertile like the the sixth rune or the midsummer wedding, and the third rune is 3 for a wedding. But when you get to 10, it is continuing on. It's producing more numbers.
Mm.
And then 21, and there's a story about this witch wife who keeps a leek wrapped in linen, and it grows and keeps her family very, large.
Well fed.
So, right. So,
What is an ater, and why are there three sections?
okay, it just means 8. The first 8 numbers belong to the god of the earth, Frey. He's the one who keeps the world fertile.
And
Okay,
just quickly, in your book, it's broken up into these three sections, the three aters, right?
right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what the old alphabet did too. Not necessarily 8 because there were only 22 letters, but the first group of letters, it ends after 8. After the 7th letter, the 8th letter relates to Venus, but it's the end of the first octave. It literally is an octave. And then the second group start with Hel, and this is the goddess of the underworld. And the runes and the stories go through the underworld and then come out. The eye of the sun is the 16th letter. It actually
Mm.
is the sun.
So are these sections there's sections of transformation? Would I be is that correct or no? Because it feels like as I was reading the book, your first section talks about, as you've just shared, like a little bit of family, household, and then we move into the second ater where you're talking about hell and water and things like this. But that's like beginnings and endings, right? There's transformation in beginnings and endings and challenges and resources and things like this. And then we have the third one, maybe which really is transformation, but this is or is this the themes here of birth and death and hidden wisdom and inner growth and things like that? So can you just explain the three aters, please? Like
Well,
so a listener who's not familiar with any of these concepts can understand how the runes relate to them. Thank you.
well, the runes from the earliest have always been divided into 8. It means 8, but it also means family. So there's 3 families, and the first family is ruled by Frey, who's the god of life, keeping the world healthy, keeping the crops growing, people get married. And then you get to the 9th rune, which is the goddess who's in charge of the 9th rune is Hel. And Hel in the sagas has become this really horrible, piebald, rotting figure. But she also, I think, had an older incarnation, older avatar, because she's the one who welcomes the onboard anybody who's not been baptized. She's related to the North, and it's on the north side of Christian graveyards. The unbaptized children can be buried, and Hel welcomes everybody who didn't die in battle into her womb, which is why sometimes some of the stories, lovers go down to Hel to beg their lover back. And it's kind of like Orpheus. It doesn't always work out. But she obviously had stories of a much kinder Hel than the one that's usually depicted, of this rotting body. And then 10 we talked about as a triangular number. And then you get to the 11th rune. 11 and 2 are twins. It's 11 is 1 plus 1, and 2 is 1 plus 1, And the character they chose for the 11th rune is ice, which is it's a reflective symbol, And in Hebrew, the 11th letter, it actually has the meaning of twin, Mikamoka, who is like, it has the meaning of likeness. And then 12 are the high gods. The sun is actually reversed. He gets all the way to the 12th night, and then the sun reverses and goes back, heads back. When you're watching the sun, which I can actually do now in my apartment, I've always lived around trees. I can actually see the sun moving. It's now moving north towards summer, and then when it gets to the summer solstice, he'll reverse and move toward winter again in the south, which is, in some traditions, you're dying south toward the death, because he is dying. The sun is dying south.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I find really fascinating is English. Most of the magic has been bled out of English, but our 12th letter is El, which is one of the old words for God. Elohim, El, So we've kept El as the 12th letter. And then, as I say, then it goes on, and the 14th rune, after being reborn through the waters of the 13th letter, we get to the 14th, which has to do with divination. And when you have been reborn, when you've arrived in a new position, you have to, there's an allotment. The runes use a dice box. And lottery was one way of dividing up the gifts. Like when Jesus died, the soldiers are gambling, casting lots for his clothes. And the festival of lots in Egypt, he managed to get 14th of the sons of the sunlight to get 5 extra days to make a year of 365 days by gambling. And the dice boxes is the runes, giving that same story, but using their own symbol. Anyway, then the last 8 letters, we've now gone back into the sky. After going through the eye of the sun is the 16th. The 17th letter in Greek is the control of the circle. It has to do with the North Star. And the Greeks use pi, which again, it controls the circle, just like the North Star did. And there was a period where there wasn't a North Star. And so there was this whole apocalypse. The world was going to come to an end. I think the North Star, the current pole star, didn't actually capture the stars until about 500 CE of this era. So for a period, there was just an empty space. Some of the stories talk about panting for your commandments because there was nobody ruling the sky. And then, as I say, there's again number magic, like the moon, which in tarot cards is actually called the moon, has an 18-year cycle, and the sun has a 19-year cycle, which again, the tarot cards use the sun as the 19th. And then at the end of that cycle, you start over again with the head of a new year.
And that's the beginning of the third Ato?
Yep. So death and rebirth, the head of a new cycle. So anyway, those are the 3, as I say, each of the 8 are ruled by a different god. And the last 8 are ruled by Tyr, who's the god of the North Star. Though he doesn't actually capture the North Star until fairly recently. And Odin was associated with the North Star. And it was called an Irminsul. He had this giant tower built. And Charlemagne basically stole the power from Odin, and the North Star were renamed Charlie's Wains after Charlemagne. So anyway, that's, I guess, number magic.
Most people, when they're using runes, pick up one, right? And they probably don't realize there's a whole story attached, a whole saga to that one rune. So if they want to expand using them like this, what do you recommend? Obviously, like getting your book might be one idea to understand this, but to really expand, like if you're pulling out, say, multiple runes and you don't realize, and you're just kind of looking at a manual that tells you a little bit of a snapshot, sort of a divination clue for yourself, some kind of guidance. What's a way that somebody can work with runes that's more expansive?
Well, the more you discover about each rune, the deeper your rune casting will be, because you'll have, it's like, again, knowing tarot cards. If you know all the symbols behind each card, it's a much deeper reading. And I think a lot of the books I've read on reading runes are channeled. People are just making up their own stories. And I think my book shows what the runes were actually, how they were seen by the people using them.
Mm.
And as I say, a lot of the stories were written down before. Well, it was written by people who become Christians, but were still very aware of the old stories. The gods. There's one story about this farmer in Iceland is looking out, and he's seeing these disheveled, raggedy people marching into a hill, and he realizes those are the old gods that aren't being worshipped anymore. So they're poor. They're no longer being gifts and no longer being worshipped, and so they're marching into a hill. But Iceland is still very aware of what hills were sacred, and certain roads cannot be built near areas where the gods were supposed to have met.
I'd love for you to just talk more about the connection to early letters, like the hieroglyphs. When did you make this discovery? Is like because you're not an Egyptologist. So like when did you make this connection and have this sort of epiphany about how far back runes and language really goes?
Well, it took probably 40 or 50 years. Well, I started because I'm a Californian from the 60s, where, it was your moral duty to know how to cast horoscopes. I took a 2-year course, which nowadays you can do on a computer in seconds. And and I never really again worked with it, but with the I Ching, I actually have 2 bundles of yarrow sticks, which those are the arrows you use for casting an I Ching. You have to have 50
Yeah.
sticks. Well, I
And the I
have,
Ching has similar looking characters, we could
right.
say as well, right?
Well, at any rate, then I started thinking, being irritated because people who study the Irish say it's totally unique to Ireland. What people saying the ruins are totally unique to the northern people, or the tarot cards is probably not really from Egypt. But I decided they're all kind of saying the same thing. I saw the connections. So what I did is, little by little, I started gathering, literally sitting on the floor, surrounded by scraps of paper. And I had piles of all the ones, all the twos, all the threes of the different traditions. And then I started realizing, yes, they're saying the same, they're using different symbols, they're using different characters. Some of them are images, some of them are scratchy letters, like the Oms are just stick letters.
Mhm.
And so then I realized I had to start going further back in time. So then I had to learn Hebrew, which was actually not biblical Hebrew, is actually fairly easy. I mean, I don't know it well, but it all has these three letter symbols for each word.
Mm.
And so anyway, then I realized, oh, Hebrew, started reading about the history of Hebrew and realized it actually came from Egypt, around 1800 BCE. Western Semites, Canaanites, people from Cain. Cain had a mark saving him from death, which is one of the symbols. Anyway, they were living in Egypt, and somebody, brilliant person, took the hieroglyphs are very elaborate pictures,
Yeah.
but simplified it and made this little ox, which is like our letter A, and made Bet, which is like the little B symbol, and made these very simple little drawings that were based on hieroglyphs. Okay. And what made it easy eventually is each letter has a name, like Aleph is ox, which is a denatured animal. It's not sexual. And so,
Created.
which is, again, all the first symbols are the one. The Hermetic tradition, actually, Hermes was actually a numeral one, was
Mm.
was the Herm, who eventually became more potent. But those are the Hermetic traditions. And so that I told you about, Bet is where the a Betula in Hebrew is actually a young virgin
Mhm.
who is also related to February. But the word Bet it comes from a word that, Betula comes from a word that means split apart, because of course the virgins now diverse, are diverse. And so the male and female divide.
Yes.
So anyway, that's where I figured out what the pattern was, because it became very clear it was a pattern. Like the sixth letter in Hebrew means and, vav. And the midsummer wedding, again, joins the heaven and earth are joined at the midsummer wedding. And so tarot cards have the lovers there.
Yeah.
That's all the six symbols have to do with the midsummer bride or the Friday night date, which again is the sixth letter, or the sixth symbol is Friday, which again belongs to a goddess. It's Freya is Friday, but there's a lot of other goddesses who give their name to Friday. So anyway, so it became, once I sat with all my symbols, and then I had to learn about birds, because some of the symbols, the alphabets were birds. And the 12th bird, for instance, remember I said the 12th symbol was the sun is reversing, and it literally is reversed and going the other way. Well, the 12th bird in a language based on birds is the tufted titmouse. And according to Peterson's book on birds, the tufted titmouse, who's got a little crown on his head like a king, scurries upside down on the trees to get his food. He is an upside down bird. So the people who made these various symbols weren't just picking them out of a hat. They really knew their world. They knew the natural world. They knew their minerals. They knew their flowers. Like this, the six symbols have to do with sharing the knowledge. Okay, like the lions who sit on libraries. And Leo is the fifth astrological symbol, and it actually looks like our number 5.
We're speaking in modern times. We use English, we use characters, regardless of where you live in the world, we're all speaking a language. How is that our alphabet, and now I'm talking about the English alphabet, related to runes? Because you wrote an earlier book, Author of Alphabets and the Mystery Traditions. So we can also say that our words that we speak are spells, right? We can speak into existence what we wish to call in. How many people do you think are even aware of that? I don't think many, but but how does it relate to like this sort of timeline of runes? Because we're using them every day in a sense when we write with our hand, not type on a computer.
I know, which makes it harder to write. Well,
We're losing that connection purely by the fact that we're typing. We're not transmitting through our hand anymore and writing those symbols on pages that are letters.
Well, the English alphabet is so far removed from its magical beginnings that the enchantments have become spells. And one of the things I think scholars who study languages or study the changes between, say, Hebrew and Aramaic, or Greek into English into Roman, they're looking at the shapes of the letters and how they change and what shape is related to some other shape. But that actually does them a disservice because they're not figuring out why the symbols were chosen in the first place. They're simply looking at how the characters change. And that's kind of irrelevant when you're looking at what the symbols were chosen and what they were made to do. And looking at the older alphabets, it's obvious that they were chosen on purpose. It's not accidental that the sixth letter, which in Hebrew is and, is the connection of heaven and earth, and the marriage, the honeymoon, or the Sabbath bride coming on Friday, which is no longer modern Jewish, tradition, but they were chosen on purpose. And whoever created the original alphabet, the thing I've discovered is they also knew the letters actually, as prefixes and suffixes, actually fit the Semitic language. Like the 12th letter is L, and it means becoming. It's an infinitive. It means going towards something. L'chaim is L is L to life. And gods are not finite, they're infinite. And so the 12th letter L actually is an infinitive word because it was chosen because in the Semitic language, L is infinitive. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of, or as I say, I mentioned the K, which the angle of reflection is equal to, anyway, it has to do with being a reflective word. And the actual ka in Hebrew means a twin, you know, it means like a likeness.
Yeah.
So whoever chose and put it in that position knew the Semitic language. It wasn't an accidental choice.
It,
So
it,
it's
it,
really,
it's interesting, isn't it? Like how we can, if you really study it, the magic that it resides, it exists actually in language, but it's also kind of sad that we've lost that. We've really lost touch of that, you know? And do you think by understanding these origins of runes, we reawaken some of that magic that resides in us?
I think so. And not just runes, but all of these traditions, because it's related to the natural world. And that's what we've moved so far away from. I mean, for years I lived in a city. I couldn't see the sun going up and down. I'm still in a city, but I have an unimpaired view of the, because there's nobody in front of me. I'm high enough that I can actually see the sun moving. And I've used to run outside and try to find the winter solstice, but the tree would be in the way. And so I'd run around and and now I can actually see it and
Mhm.
understand what people are saying about it. Because I
Mhm.
can actually, and the people who lived in the country were surrounded by the birds that they chose as symbols, or surrounded by the plants they chose as symbols. And so it's not just the runes itself, but the more you learn about how the symbols were chosen, you you're reconnecting with nature, which is where the magic in life is. They're actually starting to do therapy now outside because
Mhm.
people who are depressed get so much happier if they're outside sitting in the sun.
Oh yeah, I don't live in a city anymore. I live in a forest.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. So from your book, what do you want to share with listeners? What is the takeaway? What can you learn? Like why is it important to know these rune mysteries and these origins?
Well, I like stories. So my book is full of the stories that are connected with the runes, taken from the sagas themselves and the adventures that people went on. So if you like stories, that's basically my book is full of it. But if you're interested in rune casting, the more you learn about an object, the deeper your divination will be. Like as I say, it's not something I really do. But I might pick one to meditate on, and I do the same things with other things, including I've got a whole bunch of different minerals, and sometimes I pull it out and think about what this mineral means
Yeah.
and where it came from. But as I say, the deeper you go into something, the deeper if you're interested in rune casting, it'll make you a much more coherent, I guess. As I say, I pulled a couple of thoughts out for one of the other podcasts, but if you're, say, looking for, if you're thinking of moving somewhere, and randomly I will pull out a rune. Okay, I got hail.
Okay, what number is that?
Okay, so that would be my first rune is hail.
Oh, but what number is that in the book?
That's number 9.
Number 9. Okay.
Okay,
I know.
so
Okay, there it is.
so I'm thinking of moving, and
Mm-hmm. Hagalaz.
that's
Hagalaz, that's how you pronounce it. And that's the
Yeah,
symbol
probably
there,
Hagalaz.
right? And that's the symbol.
Hagalaz,
Okay.
Hag.
There's younger Futharks and older ones. Okay, so I'm gonna come back and ask you about that in a sec. So just you were gonna share this message here.
That one has to do with long travel, and I'm thinking of moving, but it also is a somewhat restricted rune. Does it mean it's going to be a good move, a bad move? It is 9 for burial. We're getting into the dark of the year. So that's something to think about if I'm thinking of moving somewhere. And then say another rune I pick. Oh, I picked 5. Number 5 is the journey. So the radiation of, of movement. So
Yes.
might fit with my wanting to move. Maybe it is a good idea because it has to do with lots of learning new things. And so then if I pick one more rune, just randomly, judgments with the decimations of time. So need is paying the debt.
And what number is that?
Number need is number 10. So it's the wheel of fate. And paying off the debt before, it's your, if I'm thinking of moving and I've got two that are very good for moving, but then I get one that says need, which is I have to share my wealth. I have to pay off the debts. I have to maybe make sure I've got enough money for the move. So anyway, that's, one way of casting runes is the more you know, the more you can talk about it.
Yeah, the more you know, the more you know.
Right. The original runes, which didn't have poems attached, were the 24 runes, and that's called the Older Futhark, and they're the ones that were first written down and scribed on various places, stones. And then at some point, and nobody really knows why, they deleted some of the runes. Like the gift was one of the ones they left out. But they decreased the number to 16, but they still kept, even though they were no longer 8 in each group, they kept the Futhark.
Hmm.
The hex was still kept. And so it was still called the Futhark. But as I say, having 16 versus 24 makes it much less likely to be useful in writing something. And the other thing with runes having to do with the old tradition of leading to a rebirth, they were carved mostly on bridges or as memorials to dead people that died in one of the wars. They traveled a lot, not just as Vikings, but they also went down and were the Varangian Guard in Constantinople. And people died in various places, and their families, if they had enough money, would put up these rune stones as memorials. And they were often placed by bridges, which again is a boundary. So they were placed near boundaries. And the same with the Irish tradition. The stones that were carved were often boundary markers because the Irish tradition was a little trickier to understand because they delete the second letter, which was sacred to Apollo, who was the god of the Celts, and they also delete the 15th letter. So you get the first one, which is the black and white birch, who moves into new territory. That's just what a birch does. And then they skip the second letter. So the third letter is a rowan tree. And rowan also means the quickened tree, and a quickened womb is a pregnant womb. So you get the 3 for a wedding again. But people who try to compare them, if they don't skip Apollo's letter, which was, you didn't speak the name of God. So that's why that one was a little trickier to figure out. But I persevered.
No, well, you did a great job. It was a really fascinating read, and I learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're
So go
welcome.
enjoy the sun.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to enjoy the sun. We have a really lovely warm week ahead of us. So grateful for that. But now, if people want to listen to, like, find you, how can people connect with you? Are you on social media?
I've got some papers on academia.edu,
Okay.
and I've got the 2 books. The first book on the alphabet, and both of them are available on Amazon. I'm about to submit another book on I'm kind of waiting till the fall, mostly because I don't want to have to do any more podcasts until I get these out of the way. Um, it's on the Vedic astrology, where the moon has 27 houses, and he goes to visit a lover in each house. And so there's festivals that have to do with each position
Yeah.
that he goes through, which has really been fun to write.
No,
So,
what's cool. That's a fascinating subject. I'm into Vedic astrology, and it's vastly different to Western astrology. And there's so many. It's so expansive in so many ways.
right. Well, as I say, back when you had to have all these different books and ephemerises, and now it's all on the computer. I mean, it's so much easier if you really, and you can have somebody do it for you on the computer.
Well, again,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And so Judith Dillon is your name. Can we find you don't have a website, then it's best to look you up through scholarly
Well,
websites.
academia.edu, which is
Academia.edu.
free. you've got to
Okay.
join it, but it's free.
Okay. Right.
I've got some
Um,
papers there that little by little I'm taking them off as I'm having them published.
okay.
So,
Or inner traditions as well. We can, put the link there to go buy your books
oh,
through.
right. Yeah. Because Inner Traditions is my publisher. They
Yes.
would be very happy.
Yes, yes, yeah, I'm sure. Okay, well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was really informative, and I hope people really learned a lot from this
All right.
conversation.
Well,
Yeah,
let me
thank
know when
you.
your book is out, and
I will let you know when my book is out. Yeah, thank you.
goodbye then.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.